Hello and welcome back to the We Are Birmingham Blue preview. I'm Luke Stokes, and joining me this week to preview Blues versus Barnsley is Carlo from the Reds Report podcast. Carlo, thanks for joining us, mate, and welcome to Blue Preview.
Yeah, no problem at all. Hope you're well.
Very well, mate. I was doing as well as I can be, and to be honest, from a Blues fan's point of view, we're doing quite well in recent weeks. 7 points from 4 games, only lost to Norwich. Bit of positivity and a bit of momentum for us finally. But I mean, where do we start with this game? I just said to you before we came on air, until last week, I hadn't really followed Barnsley's season much. And I've had a look at the table last week and I've had a look at the table last night, and you're joint top of the form table with Norwich and you're 1 point outside the playoffs. So just as a starter, what has happened this season and how are you feeling as a Barnsley fan?
Yeah, it's really strange. Survival on the last day of last season at Brentford, and then the start of this season. It's just been weird because I think we got 2 draws in the first 7 games, and that was it under the previous head coach, Gerhard Struber. He then left to join Red Bull New York, and Adam Murray took over. Adam Murray is a permanent part of the coaching staff and always sort of steps into that position. And then Valerian Ismail came in, made a few changes that, in fairness, fans were screaming for, putting players in the right positions, and sort of like silently and unnoticed up till a couple of weeks ago, we've just been sort of grinding out results. FA Cup match against Chelsea, which a lot of people saw on the BBC, we lost 1-0, and in fairness, against the Chelsea side, that's no disgrace. But then since that match, 6 on the bounce, 6 wins out of 6. So it's a good time to be a Barnsley fan at the moment, definitely.
Absolutely, mate. And I remember I watched the Chelsea game on BBC, and if you didn't know anything about football, you wouldn't have known really from that game which team was in the Premier League and which team was surviving relegation on the last day of the season last season in the Championship. So I mean, from that you could already tell that Barnsley had come a long way since last season. And you touched on Valerian Ismail there, coming in October 2020. A bit of an unknown name in England, it has to say, and I'm sure a lot of people in the Championship don't know too much about him, but he's obviously doing a fantastic job. And what's the sort of background on him and the style that he's brought to Barnsley this season?
So I think it's worthwhile pointing out that when the current sort of consortium of owners took over, so we were owned by a Barnsley stalwart in Patrick Crine. The Crine family sort of owned the club, saved us from administration many moons ago. Patrick's health deteriorated, and he then sold to a consortium which includes Chen Li, who's a billionaire. You've got people from America, Paul Conway, Billy Bean, and for any people that follow the film Moneyball is based on Billy Bean, who was a coach in America that used statistics to find out the best players rather than track records. Mm-hmm. And a long-term plan was sort of unveiled that Barnsley would become a club with an identifiable style. So attacking football, high press, high intensity, young players, because we haven't got the biggest sort of wage budget in this league. So we bring in younger players from that's remember, but it's like the lower leagues, if you want. Yeah. We develop them, and then we sell them on for a profit. And in fairness, that process has always sort of worked, that selling on. If you think of people like, Ethan Pinnock, Mawson, Hurahan, they all came rather unknown to us and were sold for quite a bit of money. I suppose Mark Roberts, who went to Birmingham and signed a long contract when he left Barnsley, very much the same. And what they've always done is when we're looking for a head coach, they always look at a coach that plays the style we want to play in. So our setup is 3-4-3, sort of like if we're in possession, it's 3-4-3, and they look for those attacking coaches. Daniel Stendel was the first one, and his job wasn't easy because we'd just been relegated to League One, and he got us straight back up. First year in League One, we went down with Sunderland, and we came straight back up. He then left, middle of the season. Gerhard Struber took over. Gerhard Struber then saved us on the final day. And in October, he left for Red Bulls New York. Ismail, prior to us, was the head coach of Lask, a relatively unheard club. Nobody really knew about it. But they reached the Champions League playoffs, qualifying, and sort of narrowly missed out. And then they got to the Europa League last 16, where they eventually lost to Manchester United. And I think his style very much fitted our style. So he was brought over. And in the first couple of weeks, Paulie Woodrow, who is a fantastic striker, on the previous managers that played in the number 10 role, put him straight back up front. Alex Mowat, who very much is an attacking midfielder. He played like defensive midfield, so he pushed him back in that normal position. And putting players back in their normal positions as well as backing from the board in buying exciting young talent, it's just all really fell into place. I mean, Ismail is very much about that high press, that high intensity. They call it direct with purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one for branding and because it's football to me and it's my team that I watch. But I suppose if you have to say how do Barnsley, we are direct. We stop playing it out from the back because often our young centre backs can't cope with that. So we will put it in the opposition half and we will just literally press you to death, hoping to force mistakes and capitalise on them. And the last 6 matches, definitely that's been working.
Absolutely. I was about to say, I think whatever he is doing, whether it's direct or not, it seems to be doing the job, doesn't it? Exactly that. It's interesting you say about the model and the data side of it and focusing on that. I think in modern football, that's really coming on. And you look at the teams like Brentford, who are slightly early adopters of that. And if Barnsley can emulate that model, particularly, you'll be successful for the foreseeable future in terms of the transfers as well as the performance, won't you?
Yeah, I think Brentford is a really, really good example when you can sell Watkins and bring in Tony and still have money in the bank.
Yeah, make 20 million and make 30 million. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for Barnsley, very much on a lower sort of budget, but brought Coley Woodrow in, who played for the under-23s at Fulham. Daryl DK, although many commentators still call him Daryl Dag, but it's Daryl DK, an American international, was brought in on loan from Orlando in the last transfer window. He's got 2 in 3, I think it is. Carlton Morris was a Norwich striker. Injuries aside, never really got a run in the Norwich side. He was on loan. He was on loan at MK Dons. I think he's got, is it 4 in 5? So they identified his players purely on the stats. They need to be young. They need to be fit. And they need to be hard workers. And I think it's fair to say, I saw yesterday on social media, by far, we haven't got the best players in this league. We haven't. Mm-hmm. But what we make up for in maybe quality is that togetherness and that high press. And that forces teams to make mistakes on which we then sort of try and capitalise.
Yeah, I think as well, we touched on as well the form table at the start, and you top with Norwich. And in the Championship, as everyone knows, it's 2 games a week, and it has been this season due to the shorter nature of the season. Do you think that philosophy on the younger players, the hungrier players, and sort of the energy is what's got you through this period and led to you continually grinding out those results? Because there's some squads in the Championship that have got that older age experienced squad, but they might not have the legs to deal with the congested fixture schedule.
Yeah, I think yesterday was a good example. QPR, Charlie Austin. Charlie Austin is a very, very good player. We know this. And actually, initially, we went ahead and QPR equalised within 3 minutes. We then bounced again. We won 3-1. But what we saw was that whilst they initially matched us on that intensity, as the match went on, because they've far older players, that dropped. One of the things about Valérien Ismaël, he's not afraid to make changes. In the last, I think it's 3 or 4 matches, if I'm not right, he'll change the whole front 3 in one go. Yesterday, again, treble substitution. So we started with Chaplin, Woodrow and DK, and all 3 came off. I think it was in the 60th minute. And he brings on Morris, Adebayo, and Freezer. And he will change it to keep that sort of high intensity going, because obviously they are young players and they are fit, but to keep that up for 90 minutes, it's sometimes not possible. And I had to laugh because yesterday the QPR commentary said, this could be a chance for QPR because it'll take 10 minutes for these players to settle in. And literally, I think it was 53 seconds after Morris makes it 3-1. So it's not just on the pitch where they're really performing. Tactically, he is able to implement a plan B. He uses the full squad rotation, but he's keeping players happy. A Coley Woodrow is getting 45, 50, maybe 55 minutes per match. He'd love to play 90, but he knows that actually to keep up that momentum we've got, he needs to come off and somebody needs to take over what he started. And I think tactically, Valérien is showing a lot more than what Stendhal and Struber did before him, because we were very much a one-trick pony. And if you sussed Barnsley out, we could never really change it. And I think with the people they've brought in, there is that strength in depth. And for the first time in years, I can say that actually, defensively, we looked really, really solid. Again, with 3 defenders that people probably never heard of, but actually as a trio at the back, absolutely solid.
Brilliant. I think as well, you're saying there about bringing the front 3 on and off and another 3 on. And I think at Blues sometimes this season, we talked about it last week on the show, touched on it. We don't have that trust in certain players. I don't think the manager's got a trust. He's got a bench of 9 players this season, but he seems to be bringing the same 3 or 4 on every single week. Whereas from the Barnsley point of view, it seems like you have got that depth like you touched on there, and the manager has now got the trust from the players. I mean, to talk about some of the players, we'll go into it as well later on, but you touched on Corley Woodrow there and Daryl Dike from the MLS. Interesting signing. I remember seeing a highlight video of him when he did sign on loan. Like you said, an unknown name, but what have you made of him since he's come into Barnsley this season?
Daryl Dike was the sort of signing that we were all screaming for. Maybe not Dike as a person, but we always lacked that physicality up front. So Corley Woodrow is sort of quite athletic, especially outside the box. He can be absolutely lethal, but he was the main focus of the team. And if Woodrow came deep, there was almost nobody to sort of play it off against. Connor Chaplin's a decent player, but you can't play a high ball because I think he's only about 5'1". And Freezer is very good, does a lot of running, but technically on the ball not as good. So we needed more of an anchor person. And if you do take Corley Woodrow off, you could replace it with somebody who would still be a handful for defenders. There were worries about, will he adapt to the championship? Because, whilst it is the second tier in England, it's a league like no other. Ismail, other coaches, other players have mentioned it that have played abroad. It's a league like no others, where you say you've got 2 matches almost every week. It's a very physical, and obviously a lot of clubs have players that played in the Premier League either the season before or 2 seasons before. But he's done really, really, really well. He came on against Chelsea. People sort of scrutinising him intensely and saying, "Oh, this is Chelsea." And to come on the last 20 minutes and try and make a difference on your debut, that's never easy. But yesterday again, he scores from a set piece, and he's a handful. And I think what Barnsley have started doing a little bit more sometimes is showing some of the ugly side of the game. And I make no excuses. Our goalkeeper is probably one of the best at sort of that time wasting, that 17 bounces in the area and trying to get away. DK make a nuisance of himself. And I think it's when all the ingredients are coming together, you get that, the run that we're on, where Woodrow is absolutely fantastic. But when he comes off, there is still quality on the pitch to either finish the job off or keep the lead going. But yeah, Corley Woodrow, again, double figures. We had a lot of penalties early in the season that he always converted. And I think what's happened as well, these younger strikers around him, Victor Adebayo for Barnsley, has been a Barnsley player for years, and every season's gone out on loan to League Two, to League One, even to lower leagues than that. And he is now, I can't say a regular, but he's getting game time week in, week out, because I think Ismail has put his faith in him and sees what he potentially can offer. At the back, Toby Civic. Toby Civic was a Barnsley player, and Understandable did okay. Struber didn't really fancy him, sent him out on loan to Hearts, came back, then went on loan to KV Ostend in Belgium, because they have the same owners as us. In Belgium, he didn't get a minute's worth of football, not a minute. Ismail watched the videos, recalled him back, and he's a regular at centre-back and a good one at that. So I think his management skills in getting the best out of players is it's definitely working for us at the moment.
Yeah, I think as well, with the dirty side of the game, it's interesting to touch on that because we spoke to a QPR fan last week and their run of form, he put down to, they've started to become a bit nastier. They've started to really do the dirty work in the Championship, which in previous seasons they maybe weren't doing, or at the start of the season they weren't doing. And it sounds like the philosophy of the managers had a big influence on that in terms of the pressing and really getting the work ethic of all the squad. Carlo, I'm going to ask you now, obviously at the start of the season, you said last season we've survived on the last day. Ambitions this season was to get 50 points. Being honest, are you looking up now? Are you thinking if we don't get in the playoffs, it's a disappointment? Or are you saying, while we're here, let's have a really good go and see how far we can go?
At the start of the season, I just wanted us to compete and not survive, because Barnsley, let's face it, always been. I know there are stats that say that whilst it's been the Championship, we're sort of like we spent a lot of years in it. The last few years, we've been a yo-yo club, and there was never. We did really, really well. Our assets would get sold, our best players would go, and then we go down again, and then we go up again. A yo-yo club. So I wanted us to compete in the Championship, and I think as a forecast, I said, I would target us, if we can finish around about 15th, 16th place, that will be amazing. If we can avoid relegation with a couple of games to go, that's amazing, because we either don't do that or we do it on the last day. So when he set the target of 50 points, obviously we were in a bit of a run already. And I think you have to stay ambitious, don't you?
Of course, yeah.
This is probably the best time of the year. There's a lot of matches over Easter, but this is probably the best time of the year to go on a run. And, we are doing so. And, we're a point of the playoffs. We've got a game in hand. We still have, I think it's the bottom 7 teams to play in the remaining, I think, 14 matches or whatever it is. I think you have to be honest and say, if we're here now, you'd have to identify a playoff place as not only being possible, but actually ambitious. But you have to show ambition, because if you say, actually, we've done really, really well, there are teams, like you said, Derby is getting some results and putting a bit of a run together. Now, I'm not saying that Derby will make it to the playoffs, but those teams at the bottom are fighting for their lives. South Yorkshire Derby yesterday, Sheffield Wednesday, Rotherham, both in the bottom 3.
Yeah, brilliant game.
A massive Sheffield Wednesday against little old Rotherham. I'll be honest, 99.9% of Barnsley fans were Rotherham fans yesterday, and what a victory that was for them.
Yeah.
But these are teams that are getting, so they'll not be easy to play against. So I think to stay ambitious, you have to look at the playoffs and say that is a realistic chance for us that we have to go for. Absolutely.
Realistic, definitely. I mean, you've got a game in hand and you're only 1 point off. And, I know people always say points on the table is worth more than games in hand. And down the bottom, that's looking... that's going to be where I think it's decided. A few teams have got a few games in hand. But if you're looking at some of the names in the playoffs, you're talking about Watfords and Bournemouth that have come down from the Premier League. And then you're thinking of clubs like Cardiff, who I'm sure their playing budget is a lot larger than Barnsley. Nick McCarthy's gone in there and took him on a similar run to yourself. I think he hasn't lost in his first 7 or 8 games and he's been superb. So, but then, like you said, you're going to the sides like QPR, who are in a decent run of form and grinding out results. So I think definitely from your perspective, why not? Why not have a look up the table? And I wish Blues were doing that really this season, but instead we're really looking down and trying to escape that.
It's we've got Norwich as the last game of the season, so hopefully
they could be up by then.
We'll be promoted by then. And I think we've got Bournemouth to play. I think we've got them in March or early April, so that will be difficult, because last time we played Bournemouth, it was live on Sky. I think we lost 4-0. We were absolutely played off the pitch. But he also identifies, the head coach identifies as these sort of matches to say, actually, when you've been on a run and you lose, it's not about the losing, because you will lose matches in a season. We will lose matches between now and the end of the season. It's how you come back from it. And he used the Chelsea example of, you get nothing for performance in this game. Absolutely nothing. As players, you put yourself in the shop window, and other clubs might come in and say, look at that. Mm-hmm. But as a club, you don't get anything for it. But it's how you come back. And obviously, we've had that run. Matches against, that massive Wednesday, Rotherham, clubs down there. We've got Derby to play. They won't be easy, and there's nothing like a certain 3 points. In fact, they might be harder than playing some of the other ones. Mm-hmm. I think in our favour is the run that we're on, and people don't fancy playing Barnsley because of the intensity, and you don't really know who's going to be playing. You know the midfield and defence, of course you do, but up front, it's very hard, because any from 6, 3 from 6 will be starting, and the other 3 will come on later on in the match.
Absolutely, mate. I think you sound so full of positivity, in which I'm sure you're really glad to be, after a few years up and down and things like that. So it is great from a Barnsley point of view that you are where you are in the league, and I'm sure you'll enjoy the second half of the season, even no matter where you finish in the table.
We will, and I think, as Barnsley fans, we've had really, really troublesome times, and when the board took over, there was the fear. You can have a billionaire investing in your club. That doesn't mean he's going to give you billions, because of financial fair play, you can't. So, the way it's structured is being stuck to. I dare say that I think Coley Woodrow is the best player at the club, and nobody knows for certain. But thoughts are he's probably on between 12 and 15 grand a week, and that's our best. That's our best paid player.
Yeah.
I think in other teams, there's people that's on the bench week in, week out that earn that sort of money. And initially, everybody, when these new owners came in, say that needs to change. They haven't. They said for the club to be sustainable, we have to stick to that. You can't buy success in any league. If you look at a Sunderland that tried it and failed, and look at that, Wigan brought people in on big money, and I know the ownership issue, but look what happened there. Sheffield Wednesday.
Well, we did it, mate. We did it a few seasons ago. 40 million, didn't we? With Harry Redknapp, and look where we are. We've only just recovering from that, and we've got players in our squad who are on that money that you talked of there that aren't even getting a look in our team at the minute, and that's not a sustainable football model, like you say.
And I think if players are young, and like if you look at a Coley Woodrow, Barnsley will always be a stepping stone. But that's fine, because if we can profit from that success and get us either in the playoffs, and if Coley Woodrow was to go, it would be a huge miss to Barnsley Football Club. Don't get me wrong. Absolutely. But we've already got 6 strikers at the moment that can potentially start and do start. So on the pitch, there was that sort of period of transition, and that was hard, that was difficult for Barnsley fans. We're used to it now, and we know exactly where the clubs are wanting to go. And the most important thing in these times is that there is still a Barnsley Football Club in 5, 6, 10 years down the line. And our current owners, and under the our CEO is an American guy, Dane Murphy, who's played football, who's got the connections in America. They're doing a really, really good job in very difficult circumstances, because obviously, the finances have gone down because there are no fans in the stadium. Daryl Dike, again, this is rumoured to be on about 4 to 5 grand a week, because that's what he was getting in MLS, because he was a rookie, wasn't he? He was, it was his first season. So it's that identification of players that could be a huge signing for us, or can help us achieve our goals without breaking the bank. And I think it has to be the way forward. And like I say, it's working at the moment.
Definitely is. I think going back to the game on Saturday now, on the pitch, obviously performing really well. Is there any important team news from a Barnsley perspective? I know for Blues, it's not too much new from last week. I know Sam Cosgrove, new signing from Aberdeen, had an ankle injury and he might not be back yet for a week or so. Apart from that, we seem to have most players available. Was there any notable absentees from the Barnsley squad?
Not that we've heard. So Ben Williams, left back, he's been out for the season. Liam Kitchen, who's a young defender we brought from Forest Green Rovers, he's not played since he signed, because I don't know if it was during his medical or just after he got injured. So it looks like he's got a fully fit squad to choose from. The only thing I noticed yesterday, and it might be nothing, is when they came back for the second half, and just when DK was taken off with the other 2 strikers, he seemed to be, I can't say struggling, but I don't know if that maybe was a bit of muscle cramp or whatever, but we haven't heard anything. Press conference is tomorrow, so we'll hear more. But I would suspect us to have a fully fit squad to choose from, and obviously they're trying to avoid injuries by rotating that squad on a continuous basis.
And like you said earlier as well, you've got that depth anyway. If one was to drop out, as long as it's not a number in key positions, you seem to have good depth in there. So then, Carlo, let's talk about predictions then to finish off the show this week. Obviously, like I said, you're an unbelievable run of form. Blues have started to find some of our best form this season at, some would say, the right time. How do you see this one going in terms of a score prediction for us?
A lot of teams have found... the way to sort of counter Barnsley is by adopting a similar style, by pressing the centre-backs and look for space behind them, because whilst defensively they're solid, pace-wise, I think that's an area where we could probably improve on. We've had a few matches this season. The matches where we've struggled are the big physical sides, where the ball's not necessarily played on the floor. We like things. We like Alex Mowat to be heavily involved, because Alex Mowat is he's not only got that pedigree, he's got an eye for goal. His passing is out of his world sometimes. If we have to bypass that because of the press that the opposition is putting on us, then we can get lost, and it becomes that hoof and hope ball, as we hoof it up and hope somebody gets at the end of it. Like you say, I think that there's no foregone conclusion in football, and the one thing we have to hope for is that Valérien Ismaël will install into his players that every match is a potential 3 points, and not because you've won 6, you're automatically entitled to think we're going to win this one 3-0 as well, because we won't. It's a very unpredictable championship as well. At the beginning of the season, I was asked, I don't even know if it was for Sky Sports or not, and foolishly me, I identified Forest, Derby, and I mentioned Birmingham as well, just because they are the big clubs in this division. Barnsley has never said we are the biggest club, because we're not. We're in a town. Sheffield Wednesday is probably 50 miles up the road. Sheffield United a little bit further. If you go the other way, you get to areas like Leeds, which we'd rather not talk about. So we're in the area where we're not. We're doing our own thing, but these young players are not easily faced. So at home, our form has been really, really good. So I'd have to go for a 2-1 Barnsley. I have to do it, otherwise I get shot if I don't.
Understandable. That is interesting what you say there about if teams get at you and press you, it sometimes can force you to go long and you struggle. So, I mean, in recent weeks, Blues have gone with a 4-3-3. We've got good results. We played well for 70 minutes against Norwich. Great win against Sheffield Wednesday and a good win against QPR as well, coming back. But in the week, we went to a 4-2-3-1. Didn't quite work for us against Huddersfield. So I think tomorrow we might go back to the 4-3-3 sorry, not tomorrow, on Saturday, to a 4-3-3. And if we do that, that is the formation that we have looked like getting at teams, with those three centre midfielders getting in and around the opposition's midfield and onto second balls. And we've done that quite well in recent weeks, I have to admit. The players have been doing that really well. And I think as well, I think Scott Hogan will come back in. I think Lucas Jukovic struggled on Tuesday night against Huddersfield. And Scott Hogan, his movement off the ball, I personally think is one of the best in the league if he's on it. His movement's fantastic and he does create chances for himself out of nowhere. And if he can maybe exploit in behind that Barnsley defence where you've identified there as a potential weakness as well, Blues could be in the game. But with that said, I'll be honest, I think we've done well in recent weeks. But I think Barnsley, the run of form for them will be a factor, and I think they'll have confidence going into it. And our confidence might have been knocked in the week against Huddersfield, even though we did go and get a good point and come back and do that. So I'm going to go for a 1-1. I think Blues will be in the game, and I think Barnsley will probably score because in recent weeks, Blues have been making individual errors, and the last couple of weeks, to be honest, we've sort of cut those out and looked a lot better side, but they it crept back in on Tuesday night. So I think Barnsley might get a goal with that front three up there, but I think Blues will be in the game, and I think it's a positive 1-1.
Yeah, and I think as well, isn't it, when you play, here we go, teams like Barnsley, like opposition fans normally we have, there's probably less pressure because we're on that run. I think for players, when I say less pressure, your manager will still, make the team go out and doing everything he can to win. But actually, sometimes being the underdog gives you that extra 5 or 10%.
Yeah.
And for all the Blues fans watching, when we talked about the system at Barnsley and the DNA of that high pressing, high intensity, bringing young players in, have a look, because I'm sure they'll be starting again at the two wing backs. Callum Britton on one side, who we brought from MK Dons, and Callum Styles, who's been at the club for quite some time, but we bought him as a 16-year-old from Bury. Those are the sort of players where, for us, performing out of the skin, absolutely fantastic and well worthy of being called championship players, but they're still both very, very young. And I'm sure in 1, 2, maybe 3 years, they'll be sold on for a big profit. That will then sort of write the next chapter in the book of Barnsley FC. But yeah, keep an eye on both Callums, because they, when it is about the pressing and the service to the front three, those three are just absolutely on the money at the moment.
We will do it. We'll keep an eye out for those key players. Sounds like Barnsley have got a lot of quality in a lot of areas this season, which is, like I said, great for you guys. And I look forward to watching the game on Saturday, hoping that Blues can get something out of the game. Carlo, it's been brilliant, mate. It's a great chat, and you're really detailed in the Barnsley side of things. It's been great. I'm sure Blues fans watching this will have got a really in-depth knowledge about Barnsley from that. So thanks for coming on, and really appreciate you joining us today, mate.
No problem at all, and all the best, of course, to Birmingham. Maybe not on Saturday, but definitely after that and for the rest of the season.
That's brilliant. So that was Carlo from the Reds Report podcast. Thanks for joining us this week on We Are Birmingham's Blue Preview. If you haven't already, as always, listen to the new We Are Birmingham podcast and check out the We Are Birmingham Prediction League if you haven't got your predictions in already. That's been running for a couple of weeks now, and it's great fun online, keeping competitive with Blues fans. But that's all from me this week. Until next time on Blue Preview, keep right on.